food system pathways, perspective from Régional Dialogue Central Africa, organisé dans le cadre de la préparation du sommet des Nations Unies.
We are preparing ourselves to the UN Summit on food systems, which will be held on September 23rd. These discussions in the framework of AGRF looks forward to talk to member states, partners, UN systems, civil society organizations, farmers, and other stakeholders to come up with commitments so that we can go forward as we prepare for the upcoming summit and dealing with the 5 pillars that have been identified as we look forward to attain Objective 17. The session will put forward what we need to do in future, the pathways that we need to follow. In this process, we have had national dialogues, and we have identified 3 to 5 priorities at country level on the following questions. Why we need to transform the food systems in our country? 2, what type of transformation is necessary? And the 3rd, how this transformation is going to be held, and what are the key functions. This event is being recorded. As you participate, this is an agreement that you will be recorded. You are requested to use question and answer function to bring forth your questions that you have, and somebody is taking and giving attention on that function. And you can also raise your hand, and we are going to give you the floor if you have a question to ask. We have put in place measures to show that there is integrity. If you are having any difficulties, come back to us, and then we can get back on order the fastest we can. We have 2 speakers who have confirmed because Dr. Honoré Kabone is not available, and we are going to have Madame Julie Chilombo, who is a coordinator of resources coordination of resources given by the president in DRC. Afterwards, we are going to have the intervention of Mr. Divine Intioka, who is the General Director, Climate Smart Agriculture and Youth Network. For the moment, without much ado, because we are trying to manage the time very well so that we have more time for debate. I give the floor to Madame Julie Chilombo. You have the floor, Madame Julie. Thanks very much for the floor. And I'm saying hi to all the participants. For DRC, for transformation of food systems, we have had national consultations, as just other countries have done, so that we bring on the private sector, civil society, etc. We have had a lot of participation from women who are very, very actively employed in agriculture, and the youth was represented as well. We had these discussions, and we talked about the value chains, production, and the aspect of an environment. How do we deal with the residues, and the question of agricultural losses. What is interesting for DRC, since 2016, the country has come up with a policy at the national level. And this is having a budget of around $0.5 million. This is an amount which is very small, but it can't really do everything. So already we have come up with what we need to do, a roadmap. When we talk about disturbances, we have had delays to put in place or to implement this roadmap. But we have come back to deal with this subject, and we are going now forward to implement this operational plan that is going to allow us to mobilize resources for its implementation. After the consultations or discussions, we have 1, 2, 3 projects that are going to be dealt with. First and foremost, we'd like to improve access to water. Our territory is big. We are looking forward to see how everybody gets water. Nobody really has no difficulties to access water. The president of the country has said that during the year, we need to have wells all around the country. We have different zones and they are kind of isolated, and we need to interconnect them. So we are supposed to interconnect all the areas so that people can move and have access to the markets. Then access to energy. As I said, we have a very good river network. We can start with the small dams and the small energy or electricity producing plants. We can start there. And this is going to help us to come up with the small scale industries so that people can deal with the question of the needs of the population. Once we improve the infrastructure, we can now start promoting the small scale farming to improve production so that they can have a good return after their activities. And then we are going to have exchanges between the small scale producers, the large scale producers, so they are linked, and come up with agro industry and all the activities that are involved in this, be it administrative or all such things, so that we get to improve performance, so that we have much more investment in agriculture sector. This transformation is very important because we are suffering of hunger. There is a big population which is hungry. We are in a crisis position, I could say, when it comes to extreme hunger. So we need to transform these food systems so that we can deal with the nutrition and food availability. We need to diversify the products and they be available for the population, then to facilitate access to their availability so that livelihoods are improved, everybody to get to feed themselves, and talk about diversification when it comes to foods. Our diety is a poor diety. So when we talk about consumption, we need to work in a way so that people can consume what has been produced. How is it going to be done? The summit has allowed people to sit together, come up with strategies so that we can go forward with this roadmap in a sustainable way. So we start with the policies. The policies have been developed, and we are now focusing on reforms, and be it land reforms, etc., production, agricultural activities in general. So this is the governance part of it. Of course, you need to see that infrastructure has got to be involved, improved. So this is the situation in DRC in a nutshell. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for this very rich presentation that shows us that the process was very participative, not just for the youth and the women, but DRC is committed in this process. And already you have a national strategy in place, an action plan. Now, the access to water is important, interconnectivity of the zones, access to energy. This is very, very important to transform the food systems and rural development in general in a sustainable way. The small-scale producers to go out of subsistence farming to do it in a larger scale. Agro-industry, so that these food systems are sustainable and change the way of eating, consumption, if you will. And you talked about regulation, be it seeds, etc. Thanks very much, and thanks for this presentation. Right away, we go to Divine Ntugam for your intervention before we can have a short session of a debate. Divine, you have the floor. Je ne sais pas si vous allez vous prononcer en anglais.
Oui, oui, le micro de monsieur Divine est coupé. OK.
Your microphone, OK.
I'm going to speak in English, but is there something specific you want me to talk about first? If not, you want me to give an overview of what happens as far as the dialogues are concerned. Anyway, I am the one of the.
It's as you prefer. It's as you prefer. If you prefer to speak in French, okay. Speak in French. If you prefer speak in English, you speak in English. Up to you.
It's good. I will speak in English. I speak in English. System champions appointed by the UN Special Envoy Agnes Kalibata, and the idea for us was to see how we could give a heartbeat to the summit process. And we are very, very happy to say that as a founder and managing director for Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network Global, we've been leading this process since January 5th, 2021. So far, we've organized close to 100 dialogues, global level, virtual, and equally in person, incorporatively. And Cameroon has been leading in this process because I'm in Cameroon for sure. So I've been able to roll out this activity across the entire nation. And one of the key things that came out of the dialogue was that, or one of the added value to this dialogue process, and equally to the UN member state activism, we actually got traditional rulers involved. Yeah, we got traditional rulers involved because when we're talking about agriculture, we look at land policy framework, we look at policy, and we realize that without the traditional ruler, we only have access to land easily because they're going to be telling you about, they'll be telling you about, collaterals to have land and all of that. So we're able to stem that effort by getting involved with the traditional rulers, who of course we're very, very happy to receive us here in Cameroon, in south region of Cameroon, in Ebolova. So the next thing I want to make sure is that, or I want to echo here, is that WFP has been supporting us a lot, making sure that we organize national dialogues and equally independent dialogues. So we've been able to engage persons with disabilities because they're often left behind, they're often not get involved in the whole process. Like now, there's no braille, there's no signer for this session because it's just to tell you how much we've been leaving the people with disabilities behind. So we've been able to integrate them in the whole process, and all our activities we actually coordinate right now to make sure that they are the center and priority in what we're doing. The next set of people we actually thought that was very, very important and insightful for us to incorporate were the young girls and women. Young girls are women because when you look at the SDG 5...
Mr. Divine, sorry, you're speaking too fast. So to allow the interpreters to do their job, please go slowly.
I'm sorry, I'm so passionate about what I'm doing. Yeah, so where do I start? Should I start back? Should I start back?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay, good.
Just,
yeah, so the other target groups that we were so much passionate about are the persons with disabilities. Yes, and equally we integrated the community leaders or the traditional rulers or the chef traditionnels, as you guys call it in French. Yeah, we're able to get them involved because they are the ones that actually own the land. So we're able to bridge the gap or stem the efforts of land policy and equal collateral to have a land. So here now in Cameroon and in different parts of the countries where we operate, because we're in 100 countries plus, we have actually been able to address the issue of land policy and making sure that young people in the rural communities and most marginalized communities they actually have a seat at the table when policymakers are discussing. The other aspect is that we've just of recent established what we call the Young Women Leaders CEOs. These are young women. When I went to the field in Kumba, the southwest region of Cameroon, I saw very beautiful girls doing transformation. They were transforming cocoa into oil and different derivatives, you know, even pepper into wine and stuff like that. So I said, why don't we bring these people in a cooperative, in a consortium, whereby they can actually improve their livelihood and for sure be able to send their children back to school. So that's how we set up this group. And right now, what we are doing is that we are actually setting up 10 of these CEOs in Cameroon. It's going to be a pilot project that we're going to roll out in all the 174 member countries of the UN. The other thing that we have actually done so far, of course, I have to mention that the summit process has been a very good enabler and a motivating factor because we've met a lot of people. We've been able to leverage all our efforts at the highest level you can think of. And right now we are so far developing what we call a campus CSA, Climate Smart Agriculture Campus Forum. CSA Campus Forum, it means that we have to engage universities at the university level because that's where we actually have a whole niche of young people. And when they leave school, we want to make sure that they have jobs. So we are looking at agriculture as a business, lucrative and attractive business, and equally as an enabler to stem rural urban migration. And that's why I always say that we should be able at the level of policy to transform the rural communities into rural cities. Let me give an example. If somebody is in a Kivu over there, there's no electricity, he would prefer to go to Kinshasa because there's everything. So we are trying to transform the rural communities into rural cities, meaning that the same energy you have in Kinshasa, we should have it in Kivu. So that's going to make sure that we stem these migration practices within the Mediterranean where young people are dying off. So that's the idea. And I really want to underscore here that one of the things I said in Rome during the pre-summit was that we should be able to set up youth working group. That working group is going to address issues about young people across the entire value chain of the food system. The second thing I could make this clear is that we have to set up women working group for the food transformation agenda. We need to set person with disabilities working group to transform the food system. So really, I want to say I'm very passionate and I'm ready and willing to join efforts with whichever country or member state that's involved or interested in what we want to do to actually change the mindset of young people, letting them know that there's no place on this earth better than your home country where you come from. Yeah, we want to have New York in Africa next time. We want to have all these big meetings in Africa because Africa is a continent of the future. Africa is the continent of the future. And I keep on saying agriculture. I heard people saying that agriculture is the backbone, but it's not the backbone. It's actually the oxygen of the world. Because I don't know the last time I went to hospital, but every day we have to look for something to eat. What are those producing that food? So if we don't get these rural women involved in the process, we don't get these young people who are very much marginalized, we don't get the persons with disabilities integrated in the value chain of the food system, then we are actually hitting the point out of the target. The next thing I want to say is that, of course, you know that the summit is a people summit and then equally a solution summit. Why a people summit? Because we want to find everybody from farm to fork. We want to see everybody involved. And then we have this pandemic, the COVID pandemic, we have the COVID pandemic, we have the climate crisis. And then I have to make sure that the SDG 17 talks about cooperation has to be fully integrated in the process of the food system if we want to transform the broken food system. because we need negotiations. Negotiations will come to cooperation. And then the last thing I want to make sure, which is the fourth C, it is compassion. We need to feel for each other. DRC, Madame Julie, I saw in Rome, she will have the compassion for Divine. Divine should have compassion for her, and they will be able to develop the Central African region. So with that, I want to say we have 4 C's I'm addressing. The first C is COVID, the second C is climate, the third C is cooperation, and then the fourth C is compassion. With that, I want to say thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Over to you, Chair.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We'll start thanking you for the sharing with us the 4 C's. But there are some other keywords that have been used, and especially those related to making Africa or guarantee that Africa is the continent of the future. This is a very strong message, and allow rural women and rural youth to play their roles in this process. And not that this summit is People's Summit. In fact, this is the idea, to make the summit more participative, involve everybody, and the issue of appropriation of the all. But you started saying that you are a food security champion. Congratulations for that. This is really a huge responsibility for you, and also the climate smart agriculture, which is the future as well, and the responsibility of leading people, especially developing the platform for those leaders, rural women and youth, to play their roles. And you mentioned about the access to land. I think this is one of the pillars. You mentioned the pillars, and you mentioned also energy, which Madame Julie mentioned as well as one of the pillars, access to energy. And we see that there are synergies among the 2 presentations. But something very interesting is this practical experience with leaders, cocoa, oil transformation, and as a pilot. You said it's a pilot project for the moment, isn't it? And with pilot, we demonstrate results, and especially the focus on business, because for the for this generation, we have to show to them that we can do business and help the economy and help people. You know, having a sustainable economy is one of the pillars of the future.
Yeah, and one of the things to add to that, the idea is that group we are setting up is going to create jobs for young girls and young women. That's number one. And the second thing is that they're going to be marketers. They're going to be marketing agents for the enterprises we are setting up. The second thing I want to say is that it's going to stem what we call the sex working and equally child trafficking. You know, the girl child will have access to education. So what are we bringing at the table?
Thank you, Mr. Divine. So we'll give you time to complete. I know that you have a lot of things to share with us. So let's now, after listening to 2 very beautiful presentations, and one demonstrating how the country, RDC, is developing a plan of action, very concrete, with very clear idea, and this second presentation about how develop initiatives, leadership, and participation in this process. I think we have all for a very good discussion. So now I open the floor for others to ask questions, make contributions, and to help us to build a very good consensus. Okay. Participants may speak in French or English, up to you, whatever language. We do have translation facilities. Okay.
Yeah, I can raise hand.
I don't.
Yeah. Hello?
Hello?
Yes. So is the dialogue open so we can share now views?
Yes, the dialogue is open.
All right, I just
The
received
dialogue is open,
question.
but I think we should wait for questions.
Yeah, I just
And,
received the question. I received the question actually on my dialogue of the chat.
Okay,
So,
okay,
yeah.
there is a question for you.
Yeah, maybe the
Okay.
person can voice out the question for everyone. I don't know.
Okay, it's a if
Because
you
it
wish
said
to
anonymous attendee, so
no, you can
I don't know.
you can read the question and then
Okay.
and then answer to it.
All right.
Okay.
The question says, Madame Julie, people normally associate forest with trees and the wood they provide, but most people don't see a direct link to food security. So in the context of food systems agenda, what is being done to amplify the role of forest in food security? So that is the question.
Ok. Mais parlez en français maintenant, c'est pour équilibrer, hein, équilibrer le.
Okay.
You can speak in French now so that you balance out the conversation. Because this question was asked in English, that is why I was intervening using English. The question is about a link that exists between forests, wood, and the trees. What we are using these trees and wood for when we talk about food security. To talk about DRC in particular, a country which is very rich when we talk about the forests. Unfortunately, the trees in a primary way, they are used to make charcoal. And we have seen a lot of deforestation at the forests. And we could maybe get alternatives for cooking and usage of good. So we are trying to tell the population they could get some alternatives and not just depend on forests. Because sometimes a tree like a bamboo tree, it plays a very big role, environmentally speaking, if I'm not wrong. And it also gives charcoal of very good quality. So if we take care of this tree, we could be preserving the environment. So the question is, what are we doing? We are coming up with the policies so that the forests could be preserved, because there is this aspect of environment that we need to take care of. This is my response. This brings us to the question of non-good products taken from forests. We could talk about non-good products, as we have a very big variety of trees, because we are talking about other things that you can find in the forests, mushrooms, etc. We are talking about technology now. We are producing mushrooms using other ways and not maybe the forest, and other efforts to preserve the forest as well. This is what we are doing. A lot of species that depend on the forest, we are trying to see what we can do. So nature is really giving it its best. It's our responsibility as well to do something in return. I see another question here from Anne Roa. I don't know if you're going to answer this question. Have you noted this question already? On agro-industry, what we are doing so that people can be interested. We are trying to support startups in DRC. These are private initiatives at this point. But through the World Bank, I think there is a fund that is going to support entrepreneurial activities for the youth. So there are measures that have been put in place to support the youth. we have the private sector through their efforts, who are giving a lot of support in the agro industry, this sector. Thanks very much.
Maybe ask to Mr. Devine. So about your perspective, women and youth to the fight against deforestation and trying to find alternatives for it, and policies and the role of this leadership and the role of agro industry. You spoke about business, you spoke about developing leaders. Can you make some comments on those two issues as well?
Okay, thank you very much indeed. First of all, I want to say that at the level of CSAY and Global, we have a project we call the Rights of Nature. Rights of Nature simply means that how do we ensure that we use nature as a solution to development? That is using natural resource management to develop the countries without actually compromising the environment. So that's one project that we have. The second thing I always say is that there's this aspect of tree planting and tree growing. Planting fruit trees has a symbiotic action, because you plant the tree at a certain level. When it grows, you'll be able to get the fruits from that tree and then sell them to transformation companies to produce juice. That money alone is going to permit you to send children to school. So it has a symbiotic, because I remember back in 2008 or so, I was training young people on tree planting and tree growing. And one very small girl, she was like 8 years old. She told me, I want to be a medical doctor. Why do I have to plant a tree? So I had to bring back really down the discussion, telling her that just imagine we're in a classroom and then the whole windows are closed. What will happen to us? She said, we'll suffocate. I said, okay, just getting one tree planted is going to absorb a lot of the carbon dioxide we get and then give us enormous oxygen. She said, oh, that's good. I love that. So it's to say that we have this aspect of symbolism. And then the next thing I would want to say is that let's really focus much more. There are certain crops, like in Cameroon, we have the maize, which actually is a drought-resistant crop, because when we talk of agriculture, we have to look at the different ecological zones. You know, like in Cameroon, we have 6 ecological zones, and each of these zones will have specific crop that's going to grow there. For example, cocoa will grow in Kumba, and will not perhaps grow in Limbe or maybe in Bamenda. So we have all those. We have this other aspect of cassava that has about 3,000 derivatives. So we encourage young people to plant cassava, because with the cassava, you can actually transform the cassava to 3,000 derivatives. I was in Kenya, and in Kenya, I saw young people actually transforming using banana peelings, you know, to recycle into wine, banana wine, and equally using them for pamphlets, producing booklets with it and all of that, agendas with that. When I was in Rwanda, I had ate the soybean biscuit for my first time. In Cameroon, we have a lot of that. But what do we do with it? So I think it's good, it's better, it's now the time for us to go back to the drawing board and try to maximize the potential, the natural resources we have, and get them very, add value to it. Because what makes the farmer poor is that they don't add value. But now we are telling young people to actually go into agri-industry, agri-business, you know, transformation, because it's a value add in a crop or a packaging, branding. All of that, young people are very good at that. So how do we make sure that branding and all of those transformation aspects actually come at the forefront of the table and discussion? So that's what's going to make young people rich. And making agricultural activity attractive for young people, there's some of these aspects we need to consider. That's why right now, when WFP is working on what we call school guidance, school feeding, and all of that, is to make sure that young people actually, and then FAO talks about school, farmer field schools. So there's a lot of agenda coming on, discussion about getting young people from the very kindergarten age to love agriculture, starting with school gardens. So I'm very happy to tell you that CSAYN is leading that process. We have interns from Lucania, we have interns from Purdue, we have interns from Oxford and all those universities working with us remotely because of COVID. Now, one thing I want to underscore is that having the young people in agriculture is one thing. Training them is another thing. But how do we make sure that the training is different? We're going to be training young people on what we call quality assurance. That's one thing. We're going to be training them on standards. They need to know why it's important for them to brand. They need to know why they need to take into consideration the various additives in what they are doing so that you meet the standards. Because it has to meet standards. If we have to give them, we need to create access to market. We need to make sure that there's access to market before they try to produce. So to address what we call post-harvest losses. So we are working with that. We are working on that with IFA, we're working on that with ICA, we're working with that with African Development Bank and all these institutions to make sure that we put children and youth and rural women, persons with disabilities at the center of our priorities. So really, we equally now identify mapping our young people in Cameroon. We're actually doing what are the challenges. And one of the things that came out of the discussion of one of the dialogues was that they need inputs. They have hectares of land, but they don't have inputs. How do we make sure that they have inputs? So CSAYN is working that is actually that interface between the rural youth, rural women, and then the policymakers and the donors. So we are very, very happy that all the institutions, and even in DRC, we have a chapter in DRC, we are 100 countries. So I want to call everybody here on this meeting, at this meeting, if you are interested in what we are doing, please feel free to give us a shout. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your contribution. En attendant d'autres questions des participants.
As we wait for questions coming from participants, Madam Julie, I'm coming back to you, and I request you to talk about the initiatives that you are having in your country and what Divine has talked about. He has talked about cassava, for example, bananas,
branding. Est-ce que vous avez quelque chose au niveau?
Do you have something at your country level touching about policies? Thanks very much to give me the floor again. When we talk about cassava back home here in DRC, we have a policy on planning. We'd like to promote the way people consume the cassava. They change, not just to depend on flour coming from cassava, and that is all. This is an effort which is underway here in DRC to change consumption trends. How small-scale farmers, especially women who are very much involved, so that you can offer this same cassava to the population, but in different ways. So we are trying to talk about other ways people could consume cassava so that it becomes much more attractive. We're talking about packaging after production of these different products from cassava so that it becomes attractive and be available in other different forms. Thank you. There was another question, I think. Yes, you can tackle it.
No, wait.
Do you repeat the second question, please? We talked about cassava. We talked about the sales on banana. You've talked about branding as well, talking about packaging efforts, etc. You have the floor, madam. So as I was said, for cassava and juice production from other fruits, different pastes that you could have from fruits. So it's a question of diversification. And this focuses majorly on women who are very actively involved. Yes, in Central Africa, women are very, very active. As Divine said, they are working with a number of women leaders to do this. Divine, are you asking for the floor? I wanted to talk about this aspect. This is a call to everyone in Africa. Let's eat what we are producing And let's consume what we are producing. Otherwise, this way we can reduce imports. This needs to come out very clearly. The milk subsector, for example, this is a very important sector. We can't talk about livestock transformation of food systems without talking about livestock. These are sectors that have been neglected. People are not speaking about livestock. We need to integrate all these aspects. When you talk about a system, you are talking about different ideas, different aspects that you need to integrate. And then there is this gender issue. In our organization, we are saying that in 2-3 years, the lady is supposed to come back from work and give money to the husband. So we are trying really to change mentalities, how people consider women as consumers. No, these are agents of development. These are partners and not just beneficiaries, because most of the time we think about women as parasites, are people who are dependent on us. Look at agriculture now. Women are getting there, and this is true. So we need to look at the women as ambassadors, as players, and not just beneficiaries. Because at the UN level, you saw Agnes Kalibata is there. We are really talking about integrating, mainstreaming women in all that we are doing. And people living with disabilities, bring them on board, and you'll see we'll succeed. Thank you very much indeed.
Merci beaucoup. Rapidement, très rapidement, parce que...
Very, very fast, very, very fast. We need to tackle the question of drinking water and see what we could do with the plastic bottles that are destroying our environment.
Oui, oui, oui. Oui, l'eau potable, c'est vraiment fondamental. Et je pense que c'est...
Moderator, please. Hello.
Le sujet que M. Devine a mentionné de la consommation, consommer ce qu'on produit, c'est un message très important. Madame Joly, vous avez mentionné ça quand vous avez mentionné la façon de la manière de consommer. Oui, là, ça peut nous aider à changer un peu la donne en termes d'importation. L'Afrique centrale importe beaucoup. Je pense qu'il faut qu'on puisse vraiment...
Host, if you're there, this is Ben, your interpreter speaking. I've got to rush to another meeting. I stop here.
With these very, very brief words of conclusion, I'd like to thank all the participants, first of all, but I would like to thank especially the two speakers and that helped us to understand a little bit what's going on in this region, sub-region, in terms of preparation for the summit. And all the actors in this session, everybody has been involved for the preparation and everything, communication, and especially the organizers. And myself, I would like to thank the opportunity they gave us, not only to me, but to the speakers, to build this common and solid platform for dialogue and the sharing of initiative. With this, we came to the end of our session. And thank you to everybody. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye to everybody, and thank you to everybody as well. Thank you.
+2, 3.